should so fall. Resistance is futile.
Star Trek First Contact. You wouldn't normally think of this film as a horror movie or a film that would be perfect for Halloween. But with the Borg, that changes everything. Just from the opening sequences you've seen, it's clear that this is not your typical Star Trek film. And if you're thinking Star Trek doesn't have a history of, well, occasionally being, what would be the word I would use? Gory, violent, body horror, you'd be wrong. There are actually quite a few episodes, and that's one of the beauties. It can be such a great show, or it can terrify the living hell out of you. In First Contact's case, it's a great show. This movie really gives us the Borg we've been fearing. You saw just in those couple of scenes that we've managed to keep the Borg, what would be the term? Shrouded in darkness. We get these looks, but they're not clear. They're not defined. We don't know anything that's going on, and that's pretty terrifying. Anybody who's seen this film will tell you the same thing. But why would it classify? I mean, think about it. There are some terms that could be used, and we'll get to one of them in a minute, but the most common thing is the Borg are terrifying. They were terrifying in The Next Generation, but in this movie, with an actual film budget, they were able to be what we had always envisioned. Now, I've seen Picard, and I've seen the Borg in that show, and it's a 50-50 mix. More advanced Borg, I can understand. They do assimilate stuff, so they would develop. But on the other hand, there's some things that just don't work in that show. In this movie, the movie that, by the way, was the first one to go to PG-13 for Star Trek, we get a whole lot. You saw in the beginning how Picard is reliving the moments from Best of Both Worlds. He's being assimilated. We even see that one part of his face is changing, going white with these strange lines. The process of this corruption. That alone is terrifying and a major horror element. And it keeps getting better, too. Then we get to that battle in Starfleet. This single cube is beating the living hell out of all these Federation starships. And this time, it's a fair fight. They don't have the edge like they did in Best of Both Worlds. And as you can imagine, it gets pretty bad. I mean, wow, they just got their butts kicked. Then they follow them back in time. They are there to destroy Earth's history. But they're doing it by simulating the Enterprise. And it just keeps getting better. But one thing I like is that this film has clear elements of horror in it. It works as a horror movie. It's subversive in that way. But in this case, it's actually good. Unlike a certain Star Wars The Last Jedi. Yeah, I think we can all agree on that one. Ducks! No return! You get the hint. Yeah. And now I want to puke in my mask because of that movie. Let's get back to good Star Trek then. But what about this one? After they get to Earth, trying to set this history back to the way it is, we start to realize something's wrong with the Enterprise. But it couldn't be that bad, could it? Could it?
What do you think?
The entire environmental system's gone crazy. It's not just engineering, it's the entire deck. Maybe it's a problem with the EPS conduits. Hello? Hey!
Are you talking to me?
Is there anyone else working maintenance in this section?
Not that I know of. Paul? Paul? You okay in there?
And you see right there, that is a classic horror setup. How many movies do that? that are science fiction based that aren't supposed to be, like aliens, a creature jumping out of your damn chest. That's what makes this particular movie so cool. It works because of these little tropes, because they play with stuff. And eventually, they find out the BORG are on the ship and all hell breaks loose. We lose communications. And this all works good. Remember, this is not only a physical, organic threat, this is a technical threat. It can simulate your technology. It can do all this terrible stuff. It works very good on that point. I gotta say, they did a good job here. This movie works very well on that one. And we don't see the BORG for a while. In fact, we get to engineering, this whole scene, and everybody's wondering. Picard can hear them in his head, even though all the implants have been removed. His blood has been cleaned. He can still hear the collective. That's, in some cases, a fate worse than death for some people. And yet he's going through it. I don't know about you guys, but that's some pretty serious shit. But it gets worse. Eventually, they got to retake the ship. Remember, they're in the past. They cannot lose, or otherwise all of history is screwed. And it gets pretty bad. I mean, we eventually see just how seriously dangerous these BORG are. I mean, remember, in every other zombie movie, what happens? You shoot a zombie in the head, they're dead. The next zombie, dead. Dead, 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 until you run out of ammo and they kill you. But what happens when you're in a space movie? When you are dealing with bionic, engineered, stronger than hell, and technologically advanced zombies? Well, you use a phaser. Bet we've seen what happens there. 1 or 2 shots later, and Captain, they've adapted. I don't know about you, but if you think about it, that's even worse. That means you can't even do a headshot, okay? You can't. They're going to adapt. That's a more terrifying zombie. And they're calm and collective. Sometimes they get a little faster. And the worst part is, just like with a zombie movie, many of these people are straight out victims. Or worse, they're people you knew in life. They've been through hell and back. That's a pretty serious thing. And you're like, oh, well, they can just be de-assimilated. It's like, dude, anybody who's been through a tragedy, a terrible thing, this is even explored in Picard. It was one of actually the few good things in Picard, was seeing these former BORG having to deal with, being de-assimilated. The scars, the implants, and everything. Even those who are like Picard, who look really normal, they're scarred for life. And when you see these sequences in this movie, you realize this is serious horror. That's what made it work so well. We had such serious horror elements. And there's this next scene coming up that will really show it off. Just wait.
Captain, they've adapted.
As the film continues, we see more and more of the BORG becoming a more dangerous threat. more darkness. You've literally seen them be like forces that just go through and start assimilating everything. It's terrifying. But why is that? Why do they have such an edge? Well, I'll give you one thing. This is definitely a pretty good point. And it just works. Jonathan Frakes, Commander Riker, who directed the film, he surprisingly gives us such a horror-filled environment to work with. I don't think there are many films that can do what this film did. I mean, think about it. We have true scenes of horror. We have people being assimilated. They are, you saw it, arms replaced, the flesh being corrupted by the internal structures being put in there, nanoprobes moving through your veins. It's horrifying seeing skin that's normally healthy becoming pale white. This is what makes this film a candidate for a horror movie. And I showed this once to a school program. It was Halloween, and our particular class had earned a kind of free day. We still had some work, don't get me wrong. And we were part of a pumpkin contest to create the most unique pumpkin. It worked too, and we actually won. But here's the thing. We saw a movie, and while everybody was like, okay, fine, we'll watch it. It'll be entertaining. It's Star Trek. We'll humor him. However, after seeing much of this horror, they shut up and they just watched the movie. That should tell you something. But why? What makes it so dangerous? What makes the Borg such a threat? And you saw, they're relentless. The fear of becoming one of them is unbelievable. I can honestly say this, that, wow, they did a good job. This works well. And the film just keeps building from that point on. But the best part is quite literally, and I do mean this, quite literally seeing the toll it takes on Jean-Luc Picard. I mean, we have a character here who's fighting his inner demons, fighting to stay in control while dealing with the trauma. He is literally letting it influence his judgment. We get some of the best quotes from this man. He even recites a line from Moby Dick that tells us everything we need to know. And you know what's great? It works so well. We see the pain there. We see his desire for revenge. He kind of has almost a Khan moment, for crying out loud. And all of it is done from this great horror element. That's something that works here too, no matter what. Everybody's lives will be, just affected by this. Picard, Data, it works so well. There's a reason this film is still one of the best Star Trek films ever. And you would be hard-pressed to find anybody who would think otherwise. Now, should I reveal the ending, spoil some more scenes? No. I think this review is pretty much, this film deserves to be added to any good horror point, especially since you'll be surprising them. They won't expect it to be horror. This is kind of like Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park may not be considered a horror movie, but there are times it completely embraces the horror tropes, the creature attack and all that other stuff. Surprises, jump scares. Even this film has a tiny little bit of jump scares in it. And that's what makes it so good. I think it's a great film. And I think you do too. This film, it's aged a little bit, but believe it or not, it actually still holds up pretty good to this day. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Just because of how good it is. Sure, some stuff is aged, and I wish they had done a little better job, but they were on a shoestring budget, even though they had some money to play with. And this film completely changed the rest of the series afterwards. Yep. And you know what? I like it that way too. But should you watch it? Hell yes. This film is one of the reasons we enjoy it. And technically it did get a sequel. Star Trek Enterprise had an entire episode devoted to the events following Nemesis when they found what was left of that sphere. And to be fair, the way that episode plays, it has a good horror vibe to it as well. And that's the beauty of this. Who knows, maybe next year I'll even review that episode. But I gotta say, this movie is worth watching. So Star Trek fans, I have to say, please like and subscribe. And remember, we are the Borg. You will watch this channel. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated.